Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. This is Bishop Bryan Ouellette coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this October 26, 2018. You got a little bit of my voice tonight, having some laryngitis. I've been battling it all week, but it's slowly coming back thanks to a wonderful remedy that Joy Keeling introduced me to. I'll talk about it in just a moment here. If you're watching the live stream on Twitter, make sure that you're also listening on Spreaker, because you will not hear the other side of the broadcast if you just watch it on Twitter. So make sure you can watch it there, but listen on Spreaker. All right, tonight we're talking about exorcism, before and after the fight. I'll be talking about my preparations for Ghost Adventures Live, and Joy Keeling will be talking about her aftermath experiences with the exorcism of a cursed object. This and more tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Don't go away. Well, welcome back, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight on this edition of Vestiges After Dark. Wasn't sure we were going to even have this episode tonight, but my voice returned. I was interviewed on Adult Swim Network. Some of you might be familiar with that. I guess it's a comedy network. I haven't really watched much of the shows there. I don't even know if we have it on our cable package, but I was interviewed by them, and at first I rejected it. I said, I don't want to be interviewed on a comedy show. But I went ahead, and after talking with them, I realized that they were taking the subject matter quite seriously. We had a wonderful conversation about the ministry, about what it's like to be an exorcist and what real demonic possession is like. And if you're interested in seeing that interview, I Skyped in, but you'll be able to watch it on Halloween. It airs sometime on Halloween. I'm not quite sure when. As soon as I'm informed, we'll let you know. And if you don't get the network, I believe there will be an online link to it, so you'll be able to watch it on their website at the very least. But that's when I noticed I have my voice back. So fortunately, it has returned. And I can really thank co-host Joy Keeling for that. She introduced me to this wonderful remedy of Earl Grey with extra bergamot, Irish whiskey, and honey. And I can tell you, I've been drinking that all day, and it has really done wonders for my voice. I mean, if you had heard me this morning, I did not think there was any chance that I would be able to have the show tonight. But my voice, as you can see, is quite, it's not perfect, but it's back. So thank you, Joy. Thank you for introducing me to that little bit of witchcraft there.
Yeah.
It's a nice potion.
Yeah, there's a lot of like herbal remedies that also involve alcohol, and so I've learned a lot of them.
Yeah, and honestly, getting that mixture just right, because I think sometimes when you just take pure whiskey, it's too strong and it just irritates the already tender tissue even more. So mixing it with something that is soothing like honey and tea really seems to do the trick. That's really what's missing. Because when I was a kid, my family, coming from a French, family, I mean, everybody drinks when you're French. That's the cure for every cold was a shot of whiskey. And it didn't matter what age you were, you got a shot of whiskey. And I can say when I had a sore throat, it really, I did not look forward to it because it didn't help. It made it worse, but they weren't mixing it correctly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You got to have that honey because that's what coats the throat.
Yeah.
That's what cough syrup originally was alcohol and honey.
Yeah. Well, you think about the snake oil salesmen, right?
Yeah.
Those tonics that they would make. It was just kind of an excuse to get around prohibition and, and various other.
And of course, with Earl Grey, it really reduces swelling. And so, like, it even works, like, if you have swollen feet, you can soak your feet in Earl Grey, and it helps reduce the swelling.
Something magical about Earl Grey, too.
Yeah.
I find that to be just a remarkable tea. Bergamot, which I think we were talking about earlier, is actually a poison in high concentrations. But, so is absinthe, and, that's a wonderful drink, too. So, anyway.
Well, it's medicine.
It is, yeah. It actually is. And honestly, I want to say that having absinthe with a bad cold, I want to say has done some wonders in the past. So maybe I should try that before I go to bed. That's just a little too strong right now, but I want to stay awake for this show and get through it. But we've got some good topics here tonight. And I want to say I'm trying something a little bit new. I am live streaming. I've been asked by so many people to live stream on Periscope my broadcasting this show. So I'm trying it. I'm going to see how this works for all of you. You guys can give me feedback to see how well it worked. But if you want to listen to the show, you still have to listen the traditional way. So there's 2 links up on Twitter. One, the first one that you're going to see is going to be the live stream. And then the second is going to be the actual broadcast. So you're going to have to listen to the actual broadcast on Spreaker, but watch the live stream if you are so inclined on Twitter. Okay, so you'll have to have both of those things up. Just mute the Twitter so that you can listen to the broadcast without getting an interference. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear Joy, and you won't be able to hear the music or any of the other things going on. Not to mention the better sound quality. So let's see how this works. It's a little experiment, seeing how well it does, and hopefully it doesn't take up too much bandwidth and disrupt the signal. But we're going to try this. Let me know what you guys think. If you want me to do this all the time, I have no problem doing it. Okay, so tonight we are going to be talking about exorcism, both in preparation for one and as well as the aftermath, usually from the client's perspective. And so, as you all know, I will be leaving on Monday for Las Vegas to attend Ghost Adventures Live and be there in a support capacity to everybody who is participating in this event. I will be there to help to protect everyone who is desirous of that protection, as well as to be able to help anybody that may inadvertently form an attachment as the result of something that goes on there during the 4-hour investigation. And I can tell you that Zach's got a lot planned. It's going to be an awesome show. Really, it's going to be, I think, history-making in terms of paranormal genre. So I really encourage all of you to watch it. I've been getting a lot of questions about whether or not it's safe to watch a show like that. And I can tell you that the best answer to that is to watch with confidence and without fear. Okay? Because if you watch with fear, your fear is going to be your undoing. It's not the show. It's not the content. It's not even the occult. It's the fear. You can endure anything that's thrown at you from the demonic as long as you do not give in to the natural tendency to fear these things. We fear them because there's danger there, there's risk, And there's a long history built into the religious systems of the world to fear the demonic, evil in the world, whatever, however you want to classify it, the personification of evil, if you will. But really, when you want to break it down, it's those who fear it that are the ones at risk. Those that embrace the risk with confidence, knowing that, particularly for a Christian, that there is nothing that can come between God's love for us as long as we return that love. As long as you've got that, the demonic cannot touch you. If it does touch you, you're letting it in somewhere. Okay? Remember, the demonic has no power over you that you don't yourself give it. That is always going to be the constant in this type of work. Okay? So keep that in mind. Watch it. Enjoy it. Let me worry about the risks, because that's why Zach's having me there. Okay? He's there. I'm there to protect. And he would not have invited me out for this event for any other reason. So you don't have to worry about the risks. Let me worry about the risks, and I'm there to protect, the crew and the guests that are coming for the investigation. So
it's
I was go ahead.
Sort of like when I was when I was preparing for a couple of weekends ago, being out there. People kept asking me if I was nervous, and I was like, no, I'm not nervous. I'm in the best hands ever. Yeah. And it was just letting myself trust that you were going to take care of it.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it means a lot, and I mean, that's why we're here. And, I really want to say that it is such a pleasure to work with someone like you, not just from a colleague perspective in the show, but also from that client vantage point, because, I mean, we sort of wear many hats to each other, as teacher and student, and then we have client and a pastoral caregiver, and then you have colleagues in the terms of being co-host to this show in the discussion of the paranormal. It's an interesting very different types of relationships.
It really is.
Yeah, but what makes it such a pleasure to work with you from the client vantage point, which is usually a very difficult vantage point in which to, have to enter into a relationship with someone, because they are usually so troubled, and they usually think they know more than you do, and they never want to listen to anything you have to say, because what you have to say means that there's responsibility that they have to take, and they usually don't want to have to take any responsibility. They really want you to do all the work, and you're not like that. I really appreciate that, and and honestly, your prognosis in all of this, the spiritual problem that you came to me with, which we have shared in past episodes, as well as in a live stream showing the exorcism of the cursed object that you brought to Atlanta, all of that combines to give a really good picture of what it is like to be a client in this ministry, and one that actually listens to the treatment plan. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is, I'm going to very briefly answer a question that came on Twitter today. And being that we are, very close to Ghost Adventures Live, I think it's very appropriate to mention or answer that question. And then after that, we'll take a short break, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do more than an hour tonight with my voice. I will try, but we'll take a break, and then we will come back, and then Joy will talk about what the aftermath has been for her, some of the conclusions that we were able to draw from the experience, and it will give you even further insight into how genuine exorcism ministry works, because it's not what you see in the movies. It's not what you see on TV. If your exorcist is charging you hundreds of dollars, and there's certainly some rather large, well-known ones out there that do this, my advice is to run, because this is a ministry of the church, and to charge people for this healing is simony, plain and simple. You don't charge for sacraments. You don't charge for healing. Now, you take donations, because, that's how ministries function. And there's certain things that a ministry can do that they can take fees from, like pastoral counseling or seminars to teach various programs. That's acceptable because you're not giving spiritual grace at a premium. You're basically doing a human exchange, but it's completely inappropriate to charge for exorcism. So these are things that, you need to be mindful of when you're seeking help. So I want you to have this experience with us to see just how does it work? What is it like to be really a real client and get real help from us? Not what you see on TV, which is usually very condensed and disjointed often, and you don't get the full picture. Now we're going to give you the full picture. So we've already talked about Joy's situation and the things that have happened that brought her to us for this help. And we've shown you the actual resolution stage by broadcasting that over Twitter. And we are very grateful to Joy for being willing to open up her personal life with this. But now we're going to talk about tonight, what was the aftermath like? What's that aftercare instruction like? And what can you expect when you have a problem? And, how would you go about getting it handled by a ministry like ours? So, but the question that came in before we get to all that, the question that came in on Twitter was, how am I preparing for Ghost Adventures Live? And I responded quite briefly by saying it's no different than any other preparation. I'm not doing anything special or anything remarkably different than I would ordinarily do, because this is my work, and one case is no more potentially dangerous than another case. There's always an equal amount of risk, and there's always, you go into it knowing that there's always an equal amount of risk. That's not something that you really take into consideration if you do this work. If you're worried about risk, this work's not for you. It's kind of like being a police officer in a lot of ways. If you're worried about getting shot, it's probably not a good idea to go into the police, go into law enforcement as a career choice, because that's one of the risks that come with the job. You know that going into it, or at least you should. Being an exorcist is kind of like that. We're not obviously taking the risk of physical bullets, but we are taking the risk of spiritual afflictions, and they do happen. Even exorcists can develop attachments. The only difference is that we're usually very good at getting rid of them quite quickly, and we know what to look for when they start to happen, so we can nip them in the bud before they become a more prolific problem. And additionally, we are able to protect ourselves quite better. And that's part of the reason why, at least in Catholicism, only priests and bishops perform exorcisms. Typically, not even bishops anymore. It's usually just priests, but bishops would be authorized to be able to do it, of course, carrying the fullness of the priesthood and the sacrament of holy orders. But deacons cannot, and anybody in the laity cannot perform exorcism. So that's one of the questions I get a lot. How do I become an exorcist? Well, you can't. You have to first discern whether or not you're being called to be a priest. And then once you are an ordained priest, which is a long enough process in and of itself, then you would, at that point, potentially be eligible to be commissioned an exorcist if your bishop finds you have the charism to do the work. So that's how it's done. But as far as preparation, this is what I do. Okay, so generally speaking, I say Mass. I offer the Holy Mass as close to the event as possible. So obviously, I can't take my church with me to Las Vegas. So we will have Mass this weekend, like a normal weekend. We either have Mass on Saturday evening as a vigil or on Sunday morning as a Sunday morning Mass. This week it'll be Saturday evening. And then we will reserve some of the Eucharist and put it into a pyx, which is a sacred vessel that Sister Mary Joan will wear around her neck. And then we will bring the Eucharist with us to Las Vegas. And before we go to Ghost Adventures Live, we will take the Eucharist prior to that, so that we have that grace working within us. So that's number one. Number two, I always encourage everyone that works with me to go to have their confessions heard prior, at least a week before. sooner if you can, but no more than a week out. That way you have that grace working for you. Also very important. I always bless everybody on my team with holy water, and I give some additional blessings if necessary, as well as myself. These are all things that I will do using the tools of the church to further protect myself. Then I will spend a larger amount of time in prayer, though, honestly, I try to do that all the time. I don't always succeed because my life is busy, and I wear many hats, and I have many obligations to many different types of commitments that are even outside of ministerial life. So, my prayer time gets diminished quite quickly, but I do try to reserve into my schedule extra time to prepare myself spiritually to be more effective in the operations that I might be forced to perform, which could lead all the way up to exorcism. I try not to do impromptu solemn exorcisms. That's typically never a good idea. But on rare occasion, if I do find that in a client that I'm working with, if I can get the upper hand, I will actually jump into solemn exorcism if I feel that I can get the demon out of them in that one session. Doesn't always work, but it's worth the shot if you feel that you're getting the upper hand. So I have to be prepared for any contingency. I have to be prepared for any possibility, and I have to protect everybody under me as well as everybody else that's come with the client, which includes family members and everyone else. I always encourage also the other members that are present to say the rosary, because the rosary is perhaps the best defense against the devil. And a lot of non-Catholics don't fully understand that. And it's just they don't understand Marian theology, unfortunately, and that's okay. If that doesn't float your boat, I'm not going to try to change your mind on it. But understand from a Catholic vantage point, in my personal experience, which is actually quite unbiased, I would come right out and say, "Nah, the rosary really doesn't work for this type of thing." I would be the first one to tell you. I'm not going to lie to you. But I would be lying if I said that, because it does work. And I have seen nothing more powerful than the rosary in terms of protecting people.
Can I throw out?
Yeah.
I just want to say, if you're looking for protection, if you guys are really worried, pray the rosary while you're watching the show. And if you're not Catholic, hey, it doesn't matter. Pray the rosary anyway. You don't have to be Catholic. That's something I remember, being in an Episcopal church, and somebody said, "I wish we could pray the rosary." I'm like, "We can. What's stopping you?" Yeah. And it just had not occurred to her that it was possible. So letting everybody know it's totally possible. Go do it if you want to do it.
Yeah. Yep. It's something, and you don't, like she says, you don't have to be Catholic. Just understand that for the first several hundreds of years of Christianity, Mary was a very important figure. She only became less and less important with the advent of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, so it's an ancient theology. It's not something that was invented by Catholicism. It was part of original Christian tradition. If you don't believe it, try it and see for yourself how well it works, because it does. It's a wonderful defense. Okay, so that's the preparation. That's it. Now, some people will ask me if I fast. I personally do not. I don't have a problem with those that choose to, but my problem with it is that I find, at least for my physiology, that if I am weak, and I do have reactive hypoglycemia, so it is a little bit more important that I do consume food on a regular basis, and meat protein particularly is most helpful for that type of regulation. I used to try to be a vegetarian when I was a Buddhist, and I ended up in the hospital several times. So there is a difference between meat protein and vegetable protein. It does metabolize differently, particularly for people with the types of conditions that I have. And so to keep my blood sugar normalized, I have to consume food. Fasting is usually a very bad thing for me. So I don't do it. Now, that's not to criticize those that choose to. There's certainly a definite spiritual advantage to it if you can do it, but not everyone is called to that type of praxis. So,
yeah, and that's definitely what I would say is you have to be called to a praxis like this.
You do.
Because, of course, I've been fasting, off and on for about a dozen years now, about as long as I've been doing centering prayer, which I don't know how many people have heard, but we did lose Father Keating today. And so I want to encourage.
He died today.
Yes.
Wow.
He died today. He finally passed. He was giving off such a holy aura, and the stories that were coming out of the monastery where he was in hospice were really heartening and beautiful, and we all got a good chance to say goodbye, just for all the prayers and stuff. Everybody knew it was coming, and it was just very, very peaceful.
Wow.
So,
So
I'm going to be promoting centering prayer.
Yeah, and I would actually like you to teach that to my webinar class that we have weekly online. At some point, we might take a little break from our current unit.
I'm already working on a PowerPoint for it.
Okay, good. So let me know when it's ready, and we'll find a way to put it in, maybe between sections of the unit, because I would like you to teach that, and I think it would be very helpful to our students if you did that. But now, as I said, I got to speak to Father Keating. I had him on one of my podcasts that I operated many years ago. Wonderful Cistercian monk, and really it's quite a loss to the world because I'm not sure centering prayer will live on without him. Honestly, the Catholic Church has been so condemning of it, accusing it of being a Christianized Buddhism, saying that it really has no Christian basis. That I really think that without advocates for it, like he and Basil Pennington, who was really the actual developer of the technique, and he's gone. We lost him many years ago. It's not likely that it will live on. So I guess it's going to have to live on in the laity that practice it like you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is it's incredibly popular in some of the mainline churches like the Episcopal Church. And I think there are some Methodists who have utilized it that I've known about, and it's getting to spread in the more liturgical mainline churches. And I really hope that it spreads even further because the technique is fantastic, and it's a great meditative technique just to help you learn to let go of stuff instead of always being upset over every little thing.
Yeah.
That's that continual letting go. We need to learn to do that more.
Yeah.
Because this world isn't going to survive much longer if we can't.
Well, the mindfulness practice of Buddhism, I think it would be indispensable to Christians if they give it a chance, to not, again, be fearful of something just because it's not coming from, the worldview that you're particularly interested in practicing or you feel is the correct and right one. Understand that just because something might not fit your worldview or your mold or your particular paradigm for how you live your life doesn't mean that people that have developed other techniques from other paradigms are wrong or it's dangerous or it shouldn't be done or it's not compatible. I think
sometimes you have to go on a walkabout. I mean, You went to Buddhism, I went to witchy stuff.
Yeah.
And we both found our way back home.
Yeah,
but that was because this was where we needed to be anyway, but we needed to learn those other skills.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure it's true for you as it was for me, but I want to hear it from your mouth and not assume. Okay. But, I mean, Christianity never made sense until I was a Buddhist. Buddhism gave it meaning.
Yeah.
And that shocks a lot of people when I say that.
Yeah. When I started, I don't know even when, but suddenly something about the practices that we were doing while in circle, it made me think so much of Christianity that I started seeing the correlations between the two, and it began making sense. I had to be on the outside before I could see the big picture.
Yeah. I can fully, understand that and relate to that in my own spiritual journey, which has been complicated, and it was not a rosy path by any stretch of the imagination. Any true, genuine spirituality is going to require blood, sweat, and tears. It's the way it is. It's work. There's no such thing as easy spirituality. If you're looking for that, you're better off being atheist. In fact, it's safer to be an atheist than it would be to practice a bad spirituality. And by bad, it doesn't mean that the spirituality that you're choosing is bad. It means that your praxis is for the wrong reasons. It should not be easy. You won't attain anything from it. You could only harm can come to you from trying to look for an easy religious path. And I mean, until you really engage a genuine spiritual journey and embark upon a genuine spiritual journey, it's difficult for anyone to really truly understand that. But getting back to preparation, that's basically all there is to it. I do just about everything that's traditional except for the fasting aspect of it. The traditional route is to fast for 3 days. The exorcist would. But if I did that, I would be in the hospital instead of helping my clients, and that's not going to be good for anybody. So what Sister Mary Joan and I do is what is known as the Warrior's Feast, which might be a little bit pagan of us, but the fact of the matter is it is just as valid of a spiritual reinforcement as fasting is. It's just a different technique. Again, this gets back to, not getting too connected to your paradigms and being open to the way that others have done things, because sometimes they might know something that you don't, and it's worth exploring. And one of the things that they used to do in ancient times would be right before a big battle, they would feast, and they would feast abundantly. They would eat and drink all sorts of roasted meats and wine, mead, whatever alcohol they could get their hands on. And you know what? That was just as powerful to them as would be the fasting to the traditional Roman Catholic priests. Now, most people don't want to hear that. I can tell you right now, Roman Catholic clergy would not want to hear that, but it's true. And particularly since our work in this ministry is more warrior-like rather than pastoral, there's a pastoral element to it. But in the end, what we're really doing is fighting the darkness. It's a war. It's a battle. And we need to be well-nourished in order to engage that battle successfully. So if you follow Twitter, you'll notice that good food is a par for the course in this work for us. And we find that it's sometimes that we will celebrate after with a good meal too. But anyway, that is the preparation. Hopefully that answers the questions that came in about that on Twitter. And we're going to now take a little break here. When we come back, we are going to talk with Joy.
Yes.
Don't go away.
Like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it away.
welcome back, everyone. This is Bishop Bryan Ouellette, getting ready for the second half of this new episode of Vestiges After Dark. We're talking with co-host Joy Keeling about the aftermath now of the exorcism that occurred at the Mission Church here in Atlanta earlier in the month. She's going to talk about what that experience was like, and then we'll discuss a little bit about what the aftercare instructions would be for such a case. Don't go away. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for staying through the break. We are doing just a shorter episode tonight. For those of you who are just joining us, we usually do 2 hours, but I'm trying to save my voice a little bit. I have a lot to do tomorrow, and I want to be in optimal health for Ghost Adventures Live next week, because I need my voice to do my job. It's always a huge inconvenience to get sick, because there's really nobody else in the ministry that can do what I do. And so I can't really call in and say, hey, I need you to cover for me tonight. It just does not work like that. Maybe someday, but not today. All right. So Joy, we had you came out, and
Yes.
the audience got to see, and thousands watched the exorcism of the bell. And for those who were wondering what we were doing, which probably looked a little bit weird if you didn't know the backstory. You'd have to listen to the past episode from Vestiges After Dark, where Joy discusses the nature of the case. That's all in the archives, so go and find it. And then you can watch on Twitter. The exorcism is still up there. You might have to search around for it, but it's there. So you came out, and I don't know how much you want to share, so I'm going to let you kind of lead the conversation from here. It'll give me a chance to rest my voice as well. And then once you've, given the information that you want to share with the public, I'll come in and give my commentary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know I landed and got my car pretty much while I was on hold, and told my story as I was driving up to the hotel across from the Mission Church. Well, when I went to check in, I went after the show was over and walked in, and we tried to check in, but the computer wasn't letting her do her thing. Some people came in after me. Their reservations were fine. They could check in just fine. She had never seen the computer do anything like this. So she had to call somebody. It's the middle of the night and the computer's not working. So she's calling somebody saying, hey, I need help. She never got the help. It just, after 45 minutes, for some reason, it decided to work. So that was fun. And the next day, of course, we all met at the church that evening. It was a Saturday evening. We met for Mass. And I got there about the time Sister Mary Joan got there, and she was trying to open the door, had a little trouble. Finally, we get in the front door, but the door between the sanctuary and the office, that would not open at all. She tried every single key on the keychain. Nothing worked. And granted, there's some issues with that door, but the timing was just really, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
So, she went in a different way. After that, the key worked fine. It was just when we needed to go through the door that she couldn't open it. So, and then of course, shortly after that, you showed up, and, we talked a bit about the case, talked about some other stuff, had mass, everything seemed to be pretty good. And we were really excited about the next day. Of course, during that day, what I hadn't mentioned was I was already sick. And I think I actually did mention it. I mentioned it on Twitter that, I had been fine. Once I sent the bell, I did not have any more episodes with the sudden vomiting. The way I eat, it never sets off. I'm pretty sure it's my gallbladder. Right. Seems like a gallbladder attack, but nothing seems to set it off when I'm home, when I'm not anywhere near the bell. This is kind of odd that as soon as I land, I can't eat any food. So the next day I'm thinking, man, this is going to be kind of hard, but I was feeling so much better. And I thought, well, I'm feeling better. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get this done and, have this bell exercised, get a blessing, get my life back, because this thing has been interfering with so many things. I would see people around me being affected because it couldn't get at me directly sometimes. So it would just go after the people who were near me. And the same patterns of behavior, basically whatever their worst fear is, they think I'm responsible for it somehow. And it's the same kind of weird thoughts. And as soon as I talk to them and talk them through it, they're like, well, I don't know where that even came from. So this has been going on my whole life. So I thought, I'm really looking forward to just getting rid of this cursed object, making sure all the ties are severed. And, I'm in the best hands. I have all the confidence in the world. This is going to be great. And so we got everything set up. The ovulus was on the table. I wasn't sure what would come through, of course, because what's a bell going to say? But hey, I've talked to a tree, so I delivered a message from a tree to a woman who was grieving, and apparently it made sense. But I thought, well, we'll just see what happens. And the things that came through on the ovulus were just absolutely relevant. It was just crazy. We didn't think about it at the time. And of course, we weren't paying a lot of attention to it. But the first thing that came through was together aim. And it was like, okay, so we're supposed to all aim together. We can do this. We got this. We're ready to go. And then, let's see. Pull this up and I can see all the words.
Yeah, I think I sent that to you, right?
Yeah. And so, the next thing to come through was hobble, which didn't make a lot of sense. But what hobble really means is to move unsteadily. And that's what I did. I was unsteady on my feet, trying to be silly, and I ended up falling and just falling flat on my butt.
Yeah. And that was like literally just a few minutes after that word came up, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It happened right before it actually happened. So, they knew that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
The next words to come through, 40, which 40, it took me a second, but what happened with this bell was 40 years ago. So that started to kind of hit a little close to home. And then
was
the
it
next
exactly
words were
40 years ago?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because my parents divorced when I was 3, and that was when things began.
Oh, that's
and people noticed that my personality changed, but, of course, nothing was really said. So I didn't, nobody knew what was going on. But right. Exactly 40 years ago. And the next words were reach, window, and used. I used to keep that bell in a china cabinet that came with the house. So it was used furniture. And I had to reach into it to get it. But I don't remember doing it, but I know that it happened. I know that I'm the one who pulled it out of there. And of course, it's right by the window. So all of those words were relevant. And then during, all that commotion, doing the exorcism on the bell and giving me unction. The next words were "got rapture."
Yeah, that
And
was.
I've seen some bumper stickers that say that. I just thought that was hilarious.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
That's
there is a
interesting.
bumper sticker that says "got rapture."
Huh.
And then, of course, the last word to pop up was leaven, which generally refers to bread that has risen, the yeast that makes it rise, the leaven.
Right.
Leaven versus unleavened bread. So it was just crazy how everything seemed to be relevant. And we felt like maybe there was something positive there. But at the same time, we did this exorcism, and there really should have been more of a fight than that. And part of the reason I told everybody about what we were going to be doing and invited everyone to watch is because, we were sure we knew where this demon had come from, what family of fallen angels it belonged to. And I mean, we knew it was like, this is nothing. We got this. We could do this in our sleep. And yet it just felt like something that wasn't real disintegrated while we were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, why does it feel like we're doing this on a decoy? And it just, something felt off, and I could not put my finger on what it was.
Well, there was no resistance at all,
Yeah.
which is
And that
not
was-
something that's typical of a cursed object. There's usually always resistance, and there would usually be some kind of effect that would be picked up on either the periscope, or the SLS, or the Ovilus gave us some interesting information or some interesting data points before we got started, but nothing came through during the exorcism.
Yeah.
And so there was no nothing lashed out. There was no effect in the environment. And that's all somewhat atypical for an exorcism of a cursed object. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, had me sitting there as I was praying the rosary with Sister Maximilian and Sister Elizabeth. I thought, am I just crazy? How these things happened? All of this stuff really happened. I experienced these things, and I told you about them as they were happening. Why is there no resistance? Because I could feel something was off.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I couldn't put my finger on what it was because, of course, I also don't have as much experience as you do. And so things were just starting to not add up anymore because we knew what it was going on. We knew what the problem was. Everything was going to be resolved in like 30 minutes or less. I mean, we were going to have a blast.
Right.
And none of that took place.
Yeah.
Even... we had a lovely dinner planned for afterward, and I still feel absolutely horrible about that.
It wasn't your fault.
Yeah, but I got sick during the dinner, and I could not stop. And it was absolutely one of the most embarrassing things I've been through. And it was the most violent episode I'd had. And I barely ate anything.
Yeah.
But I immediately, it was all gone. And I had not eaten because I tried to eat the day before and it was like, okay, that didn't work. So I'm just going to fast because I know how. I'm skilled at that. And I feel confident in my ability to, still be able to sustain myself. Even if I don't eat for a few days, I'm all right.
Right.
But it went on for 5 days that I was not able to consume anything. And I felt so much better the next day. So I thought it was over. But right before, as I was getting ready to go to Mass Monday night, because that was when we were going to do the confirmation. And
right. Yeah.
as I was getting ready, I began throwing up the most violent I've ever done it. I took a picture of it so that when I finally managed to get in to see a doctor, I can show it to them and say, look, this is for real. And I think, that seems to be one of the problems that I keep having when I go to a doctor. They won't listen to anything, and it's like I'm talking to something and they're hearing something completely different. Like they're having a completely different conversation than I'm having. And, the only thing I could think of was maybe something was influencing them too. I don't know. I keep trying to tell them, these are my health problems. Look, here's pictures. Look, here's proof. And I still get told things like, oh, I don't think a gallbladder would cause this. Really? Because WebMD disagrees with you.
Yeah.
So it's been really hard to get the help that I needed.
And that's kind of a typical story. I want to just interject that here. We have a lot of clients that have experienced that same thing where they're having some type of medical issue associated with the ongoing spiritual problem, and they're getting no help from their doctors. None at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like having a completely different conversation. They're talking to someone else in the room, and you're wondering, who are they even talking to? And so, I took pictures so I could take that with me, but then I went, and I was determined I was going to get through this mass. We were going to do the confirmation. And then while we were talking, the details of my baptism came out, and you thought I'd been baptized Episcopalian. And I remember telling you that I was baptized Seventh-day Adventist.
Well, and see, that's what's interesting about that is that we went back into the records, and I talked with every clerical member who was present at your interview, and we all had down that you were baptized Episcopal.
Wow. And see, I thought we recorded, but we did have problems with recording stuff.
I could go back and check to see if the tape. Yeah, there is a tape. There would be a tape of that. That would be interesting to go back and see if we could find that.
Yeah, because I know when that was going on, we had to switch because something went wonky and the battery died, and we had to bust out a phone.
Yes, I think that might have been during the actual blessing that we did for you. I think we have the interview intact, though. Okay. I'll go back and check the record.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is we all had down that you were Episcopal, so we all heard that, which was shocking when we found out that it was Seventh-day Adventist, because for those who are not familiar, that is not an accepted baptism by the Catholic Church. It's not considered valid because in some, there's no standard practice within the denomination for baptism, but a lot of ministers don't even use the Trinitarian formula, and that would be the only thing that you could use to make a valid baptism. You have to baptize with water. You can't use milk. You can't use alcohol. It has to be water, and you have to, so that's proper matter, and then proper form is that you have to baptize in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. If that is not performed, then it's not valid. So that's not to say that a Seventh-day Adventist couldn't baptize validly, but because, how long ago was that for you? You wouldn't remember probably, right?
Yeah, it was 1988.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long time. You probably don't recall.
No.
So what we did in that situation, for people that are not familiar with how we would handle this, is we then just changed our plans that night, and instead of giving Joy the sacrament of confirmation, we prefaced it with a conditional baptism. And a conditional baptism is pretty much the same as a ordinary baptism. The only difference is the words that are used by the priests, where you would say something to the effect of, Joy, Keeling, if you have not otherwise been baptized, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. And so that way it's covered, the grace is covered either way, because there is absolutely no it's completely prohibited to baptize more than once. I mean, that was established in 325 at the Council of Nicaea. There's no changing that. There was one death on the cross. There's one resurrection from the dead. There is one baptism for the remission of sins. That's theological, immutable theology. So we can't baptize just because, we want to baptize. And I get a lot of people that say, I'll ask them, have you been baptized? And they'll say, oh, yeah, I've been baptized 3 times. And they tell me that like it's a good thing, like I'm going to really respond to that. And then I have to say, oh, my goodness, no, that's not a good thing. And
there's a lot of problems with Anabaptists.
Oh, yeah.
Because they will just baptize everybody over and over again, and you can only do it once.
Yeah. So conditional baptism is the method that the church has to rectify situations, because now we live in a world where you got different denominations doing different things and using the same terminology. That's a big problem. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make that clear.
Not a problem at all. And of course, we had some issues with the baptism. Things started happening as soon as we got started. It was like there was a thickness in the air. It was hard to see. And, you keep it pretty dim in there, but I love dim lighting. I don't turn the lights on half the time. I'm light sensitive. I don't like having lots of bright light. Right now, all I have on is a Himalayan salt lamp. Wow. I've got some incense going, and that's perfect. Just, that's all I need. But it seemed dimmer than usual, and it seemed like everyone kind of had a shadow over them, and I couldn't understand what that meant, but I've seen it a number of times. And there was all this confusion, and I remember, just trying to stay on my feet sometimes. We had to have a chair under me, and I was just struggling to keep standing because I was so weak. And it wasn't just that I hadn't eaten. It was also, this just, I felt drained because I wasn't feeling like that when I first went in there, but gosh, I was just barely able to keep up and stand. And, Sister Mary Joan and Sister Maximilian both did great, helping me, keep up,
right.
Rather than just, collapsing to the ground. But there were times when, I saw it affecting Sister Mary Joan. She was just looking at me going, there's something wrong. I am so confused, and I don't know why. I don't know how to say, Lord, hear my prayer. This is something we do all the time. Yeah. How is this happening? And then, there you were with the book, flipping, trying to find the page that you were supposed to start on. It wasn't even there.
That page was gone. It was as if it had been ripped out. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had to set that down and run and get a different book. So I ended up getting an exorcism with the baptism too.
Yeah, you did. And that's why we wanted to use the old Roman, we used the old Roman ritual for your baptism, because the exorcisms in the Roman ritual are the original form that doesn't, sugarcoat the language. The new order for baptism almost makes it seem like the devil's kind of like a little pesky buddy that you have to deal with at school, but he's just an irritant. Whereas the Roman ritual doesn't hide the fact that he's the enemy of mankind.
Yeah. And let's just, call on all the saints to show up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We did the Litany of Saints. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We called on your baptismal saint, and as well as your confirmation saint. Yeah.
And, just trying to get through all of that. Somehow, it's like, I know these words. I know the prayers. I know the responses. I've studied liturgy. I actually took a class in liturgy from a Catholic school for my undergrad. Yeah. So I'm familiar with all of this, but none of us could get words out right. And we were just like, what is wrong? Why are we so confused? this thing should have been dead yesterday.
Right.
And that's when we really had to start questioning what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
And, and so by the time we talked about it later after I'd gotten home, and let me tell you, I mean, I'm eating like a pig. There is no problem with my eating.
So holding it down, you're holding it down now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even feel weird.
Good.
So, I mean, I know I have, an issue, but I know how to take care of it. And I haven't had any kind of issues at all since I left Atlanta.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And, I mean, that was a rough time because, I got fevery and delirious, and I was so scared to even try to go to a doctor because I'd had such horrible experiences just trying to get help. How's it going to be when I'm, this close to whatever the entity is that's been attacking me all this time?
Right.
So, yeah, once I got home, everything seemed fine. And so I'm just trying to get with some doctors and try to get everything hammered out and get something done to take care of this. But I don't think this entity would really try that method quite so much because it got busted.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I think we really nailed what it is once we had some time to think about it. And of course, I was not expecting that conversation to go very well. Were you?
Well, I mean, I don't really think about it, to be honest. I never sugarcoat anything. I always keep it as basic and as real as I possibly can, because I do feel that it is important for there to be absolute honesty when dealing with a client, and we're not going to do any good if we're worried about people's feelings or if we're worried about how people perceive the answer. We can't heal if we lie. We can't heal if we manipulate the truth to make it, more acceptable. So I really don't think about it anymore. I mean, I know that I'm so used to clients not accepting the answer that at this point I basically say, here you go. This is my expert opinion. Take it or leave it. And, I've got plenty of other clients to get to. So for those clients that don't listen to me, there's no shortage of clients waiting to hear from me. So I can't really spend extra time on a client that doesn't want to listen. But you do listen. And so what, do you want to share with the audience what the conclusion was?
Yeah. Because I was kind of excited because, thinking it was a fallen angel, that's a really rare case. I mean, nobody gets those. That's not, that's one of the few things you ever run across. What it usually ends up being is either a wrathful spirit, an elemental, or a created spirit. Right.
The fallen angels are once in a blue moon. Those, you'll see those very, very infrequently.
Yeah. And so what we believe this one to be now is a created spirit that came 40 years ago when the trauma of the abuse happened. Something in myself somewhere kind of broke, because that's what that does. That's what that kind of trauma does to people. So instead of fracturing in my head, this entity manifested out of my trauma. And it's been trying to sabotage me ever since. And so basically what I'm battling is me, but it's not me, because I would never want to prevent you from performing a baptism. I would, how would I even hide the page? I can't do that.
Right.
And that's one of the things, it's like, well, how could that possibly have been connected to me? How can I do that? Well, when we traumatize other people, those people, this could happen. There's a lot of things that can cause a created demon, and one of them is when you hurt someone else so horribly that you're like basically destroying them. And I would include bullying in that, because the bullying that I experienced growing up was something just horrific. I couldn't understand why, there just 3 kids would beat me up on a daily basis one year. And there was no call for any of that. It was just, we've decided we're going to hurt you every single day. That kind of thing has its toll. When you do something that destroys a person like that, it causes trouble. And I have heard so many people say things like, oh, I didn't traumatize you. You're just too sensitive. We can't do that. We need to start accepting responsibility for the things we do to other people, because we're making more demons. And these are the most common kind of demon. These are the things that we make ourselves. These we produce, and we make them.
And it's a lack of mindfulness that
Yes.
is really the root cause to it, because we live, and I actually mentioned this on my interview earlier today with Adult Swim. It sort of came up. I believe it came up on that. I've been talking to a lot of different people today, but I think it was during the interview. What we do with our society is we have created a culture that believes that, well, it's basically the old adage that says it's all in your head. We've all heard that. When you've done something or felt something, and, either a parent or a teacher or some authority figure will come over to you and say, oh, it's all in your head. And that has created, that mentality has created this idea that we have now, that what's inside your head is not real, and what's outside your head is real. The problem with that is it creates also the tendency to think that you can have any thought that you want, but until you act on it, you don't make it real. Well, Here's the problem with that, okay? You do anything that you think is creating energy, and at the non-corporeal level. Now, Buddhists have always understand this. Western religion, not so much, because there's less of a metaphysical edge to their various practices. But in Buddhism, there is something that is known as a tulpa. Okay, now This is basically a thought form, and it is something that can be created. Now, this can be done in a beneficial way. It can be done in a very negative way. And it can be done intentionally, and it can be done unintentionally. That's how powerful we are. Just by virtue of having thought, we're able to create. Now, most of the time, these creations just fade, come into existence and then fade right back out, so they don't really have much of an impact. And that furthers the myth in our society that what's all inside our head is really just not very real, because most of the time our thoughts don't really have any lasting, enduring effect enough to produce anything in the external world. But anybody that is involved in the magical worldview, witches will tell you this, neo-pagans will tell you this, anyone that practices magic will tell you this, as well as the Eastern religions that understand this, that when you focus your intent into a thought or an idea, and then you give it life, and you feed it, and you cultivate it, then it starts to produce its own reality. It becomes a tulpa. It becomes a thought form. And then if you really create a really powerful one, it can become what is known as an egregore. And that's where it can affect other people other than you. Sometimes to the point of even being able to see it. It becomes an apparition, and people think they're haunted. They think it's a ghost. Well, it's not a ghost in the true sense. It's a ghost in the spiritual sense, because, technically any spiritual creature, you could argue, is a ghost or a spirit of some kind. But the origins are all different. And so, what I think you have here, well, what I know at this point, because of the resulting exorcism, is just a thought form. And so you might say, well, how are you able to create it? How are you able to create a tulpa accidentally through it? And how could you have such a powerful thought process that could endure to the point that it could produce something and endure for 40 years? Well, folks, that's what trauma does to you, because it becomes an obsessive, repeating thought process, and that's what the root of all anxiety is, depression, suicidal ideation, all of those nasty things that we tend to go to psychiatrists for have spiritual origination points.
Yeah. And of course, talking to my therapist about that was kind of difficult because the fracture is not in my psyche. It's not like I got traumatized and now I think everything is some kind of demonic attack. That's not what's going on here. There's actually an entity running around doing things to people and doing things to me. And it's just a difference of where it came from. It's not an angel that fell. It's not an elemental that, was spawned whenever elementals come out. It wasn't a person who died, except it kind of in a way was, because it was a piece of me that died. But it was still living on, and it just kind of hung on there. It just kind of attached itself like a gangrenous limb. Like, say I'd cut my finger and it wasn't reattached properly. It was just sewn back on. Eventually, it's going to rot, and it's going to turn gangrenous, and it's going to start poisoning the rest of my, healthy limb. So the thing you got to do is just cut it right off.
Right.
But, before that, it just sits there poisoning you. Because it's not getting enough nourishment. It's maybe getting enough to still think it might be salvageable. But it's just rotting.
Well,
it's rotting slowly. It's rotting slowly.
Let me let everyone into a little secret about this. Because, see, this is actually the root of dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah.
What it is that the natural process, spiritual process, for dealing with a trauma is to remove or extract those malignancies within one's psyche and project them out. But see, typically speaking, the energy is think about your own thoughts. How long can you hold on to the same thought before your little monkey brain runs off to the next tangent? Typically, we're not very good at that, which is why Buddhists learned how to create tulpas, because their whole concept of mindfulness is to focus and to be able to concentrate on that one point. And so they can produce very easily. However, trauma is almost like a type of concentration point. It's just an unconscious automatic one. Now, what will end up happening is that the natural process for the psyche is to project that out with the intention that it will get washed away, and it won't get enough energy to take hold, and it just gets passed on. That's how we deal with almost all of our traumas, which is why you can have. I used to work with kids who were sexually abused, and it was always interesting to see. And you can usually kind of tell very early on which ones fell into each group. You had those that were just completely resilient, and it happened to them. They dealt with it. They moved on. And then you had those that you could just tell they were going to let this destroy them slowly over the course of their life. And so those that moved on are the ones that were able to let that natural metaphysical process of the psyche extracting the malignancy and projecting it out and letting it just wash away by the natural process of entropy within the universe. But what happens sometimes is that it can get fueled, and then it sticks around and becomes an attachment, an externalization. It's no longer you. It's its own self now. Or the process actually goes wrong. There becomes some type of disorder in the natural process, and it gets stuck in the psyche. And that's what dissociative identity is. It's when a psyche is trying to do its natural purging of these malignancies that come up, because we all suffer trauma, different levels and different sensitivities to it. I mean, you get kids that, can be beat to a pulp and they're just fine as adults, and then you get kids that you look at them funny and it becomes a complex forever. So there's different sensitivities. There's different and those different that what constitutes the various elements. Excuse me. What constitutes the various elements of that person's beingness will determine how smooth that process goes. But if it goes wrong, it gets stuck in the psyche. It never gets projected out. Becomes dissociative identity disorder. Yeah, Tara's talking about Sybil. And Tara, I meant to say this at the break and I forgot. I just want to say thank you so much for all of your donations to this show. I wanted to give a shout out to you. You're so loyal to us. You always give a donation to keep this show on the air. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Just want to say that.
She's awesome.
She really is. But so that's what you're dealing with. It's both good and bad, Joy. Because the good news is it didn't get stuck in your psyche. So that means that mentally you can heal. There's nothing that should become a long-term mental illness. Now, you're going to have various normal processes,
of course,
that you're going to have to deal with emotionally.
Absolutely. I mean, I've even been diagnosed with PTSD because of all the things that happened and how it just dropped like a bomb, earlier this year. So that's something that I really do have to work through. And, that's something that I'm gleefully working through. I love the fact that I'm, able to do this work.
Yeah.
So, I'm all up for healing.
That's the
good news.
Yeah.
But there's been bad news too.
Emotionally and psychologically, now you can heal, and now you can heal. The bad news is, you had this attachment from what we would call a created demon, but we know it's basically a negative tulpa. And now there's going to be residual shadowing within your psyche because it's been with you for so long. So it's like the after image of a flash photography, on your retina. It's kind of like the feeling that amputees get when they lose a limb that they've had all their life, and now they still feel it being there when it's no longer there. You have to now train your psyche to no longer feel the presence of this thing, because you're still going to feel like it's with you even though it's not.
Yeah. And something, earlier today, something touched my neck. It felt really strange, like a cold finger, but it was kind of watery and wet. Mm-hmm. And of course, there was nothing there. There's nothing touched my neck. I've got hair in front of it. So, there was nothing actually happening. But I'm sitting there thinking, okay, is this one of these residual things? Or did something show up out of the blue? But nothing really happened after that. It seemed like it was something to get my attention and then vanished. So I'm thinking that was probably more of an echo.
It could be an echo. And then we also have the added benefit and detriment of you being, what we would call psychically sensitive. Yeah. So you're also going to be naturally still for the rest of your life more in tune with the various spiritual activity that goes on everywhere, which means that, there's always spirits passing through. And you're going to be able to feel them. You're going to be able to feel that energy move through your environment, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just maybe a curious elemental that comes by and touches you, and your brain's going to interpret it as a wet finger. Or it could very well be just a shadow. You kind of just have to get to the point where you accept a certain amount of this by not giving it too much meaning in your life. You just simply acknowledge it, sort of like the distractions that you get when you're meditating. What they teach you at the beginning stages of Buddhist meditation applies here. You have to tame your mind. You have to train your mind by taming it. It's a vicious beast, and it does not want to be obedient to you. So you have to train it to no longer get distracted, to not go off on tangents, to not let that monkey brain just go off in all these different directions, worrying about the day, worrying about money, worrying about your job, your boss, whatever. And then stay focused on the point of the meditation, which is mindfulness and then, dissolution. So what do you do when you're starting out? Because obviously you're not trained. How do you go from being, a person that has never meditated to somebody that becomes a master at it? Well, you train yourself by recognizing, without becoming alarmed to them, the various distractions. So you're meditating, you're breathing, you're focusing maybe on your breathing or the tip of your nose, whatever your focal point is. And then all of a sudden, you're doing good for about maybe a minute and a half. And then all of a sudden, your spouse enters your mind and you realize, oh my goodness, I was supposed to remind him to do this and I didn't do it. So now you got a distraction. So what do you do when you're meditating? You're trying and you're thinking about this. Well, you say, I acknowledge this thought, and then you let it slide right back out. You don't get angry at yourself. You don't get frustrated. You just let it slide right back out. For mediums and psychically sensitive people like yourself, you have to do the same thing with the psychic data. Just you're going to acknowledge the distraction. Okay, something touched you. Okay, big deal. Let it go. Move on. Yeah. That doesn't change the fact that you still have to water your plants, make yourself dinner, go to school, whatever it is that you do that makes you a functional person. Doesn't change the fact that any of those things go on. You still have to do them. And you know what? Over time, you train yourself. And then what also it is, you're sending out a message psychically that you want to be left alone. Yeah. I didn't give you permission to touch me with a wet finger. I don't want you touching me with a wet finger. Go away. And these manifestations stop happening after a while, just like the distractions in meditation eventually go away. So that's the next step for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I did was, I kind of briefly checked to see, is there something trying to get my attention? I didn't feel anything after that. I was like, I'll just tweet about it and move on. Because weird things happen around me just all the time anyway. So I'm trying to record that. I'm trying to acknowledge the weird things that happen and then just move on, because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of data points, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah. It's no more important. And for people out there that are experiencing the same thing, and I know a lot of you do, because you talk to me about it. You send me messages, you send me emails. I hear it all the time, both on and off the internet. For those of you who are experiencing similar things, understand that these encounters, 9,999 times out of 10,000, it is no more important than the static that you get between stations on a radio when you're trying to find the station, the music you want to listen to, and you're going through the stations, and then you have to deal with like the static between frequencies. It's no more important than all that static. It's just data points. Nothing significant about it, no meaning to it. It's just data. There's spiritual data everywhere, and those of us who are tuned in are going to be able to hear it. You're going to hear the static. So just understand, you got static between frequencies of experience, but focus on you're there to listen to the music. You're not there to listen to the static.
Right.
Don't let the static distract you.
Unless it's sweeping, then that's okay.
There you go.
I'm pretty good with a spirit box. I'm just saying.
That's a different type of thing. But then again, that's also a good point, because that's exactly what spirit box communication is. It's really this. I mean, I have never turned on an SB11 or an SB7. I tend to like the SB11 more because it's a little bit clearer.
I do too.
Yeah.
I don't know why it is, but it works so much better. I have both, but the SB11 with one speaker, that's my thing. Yeah,
that's my thing too. That's the one that we prefer to use when we use it. But I can honestly tell you, I have never been anywhere where I cannot have a conversation with something, because there's something everywhere. And it's just random data points out there in the cosmos, and that thing can pick it up. And so, you're going to obviously get something. That's why you can get an EVP anywhere, because there's just random data points passing. It doesn't mean it's meaningful. It just means it happens. So the meaningful stuff, that's where you start to focus on God and prayer. You want meaning and spirituality, you focus on those things. You don't worry about the random data that's not significant. Feels significant, but, like I said, 9,999 times out of 10,000, it's not significant. And that 1/10,000th time that it is, that's when you got a real haunting or some kind of disturbance that would require the help of somebody like me. So, I mean, that's when you're talking about a genuine haunting, not, something that would be a manifestation or a it's such a good point right now to bring up. Do you know how many clients come to me thinking that they have an attachment when really all they are is psychically sensitive? and they've been sensitive
Oh,
all their
wow.
lives. They think they're haunted, and it's like, yeah, of course you're haunted because you can hear them, and
Yeah.
they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I first my first encounter seeing a bunch of demons, that was the first time I'd ever seen a demon, and I saw a bunch of them, and they all looked like these little lemurs, and they were just perched on people's shoulders, and I could hear, because imps have a weird, distinct thing when Chris Fleming is doing a EVP session, he will get these imps that speak with these raspy voices, and that's what they sound like when I hear them. Yeah. And they, like the first time I ever, walked into an area and there were all these people and they all had these little attachments, and I heard them going, "What's she doing here? She'll ruin everything." And I'm just like
a wicked witch of the West.
What the heck is going on? Yeah, and it freaked me out because I'm like, what in the world is happening? Because that was the first time that had ever happened. Mm-hmm. And then, but it wasn't anywhere near the last. But try explaining that to your therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I keep thinking about right after, when I finally started feeling better, and it was time for me to go home, I went to Mass at the cathedral in Atlanta, and I thought, while I'm here, I should see a museum because I really have a thing for museums. And I found
some good ones too.
It was a Jewish heritage museum, and they talked about the history of Jewish people in Atlanta and in Georgia, and it was really interesting. But they also had a Holocaust exhibit, and that was really hard for me to get through.
Yeah,
because I had just gone through this whole ordeal with this object and telling everybody about it, and that was all scary stuff. But here were these people who had survived really awful things. And I thought about what had happened to me and thinking about what they had been through. And I wonder, is that Dybbuk, is that from, the pain? Is that from a person that was suffering and this trauma attached to the box?
Right.
And now it's in the minds of everybody. I mean, I remember when I first heard about it, it was 2003. I had special ordered an album by a Japanese rock singer, and when it showed up, there was one song called Dybbuk, and I'm like, "What the heck is that?" So I looked it up, and that's about the time that this box was making the news.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I've been following this thing since it first was announced to everybody, and now it's going to be opened, and all I can think is, I want to see what this thing is. I wish I could be there, Right. I wish I could be the one to open it because, I'm weak, but I want to know what it is. I'm so curious that I want to know what kind of entity it is because I can sense so many things about stuff like that.
Well, there could be, it could be multiple things. There's all sorts of possibilities to this. They're calling it a Dybbuk. And if that's what it is, then it's definitely something that can be easily dealt with as long as it's being dealt with properly. But that wouldn't make it any less dangerous or any less hostile, particularly to anybody that would open the box that doesn't have the intention to liberate it. And I mean, certainly with a Dybbuk, that's the goal. The goal is to negotiate its liberation. In Kabbalah, what one would do is extract its negative energy patterns and let those dissipate while assuring the genuine, the actual holy part of the spirit reunification with God. It's a bit of a complex process, but I mean that's typically what would be done with a Dybbuk. Exorcism would not be the usual pattern unless, of course, it's lashing out where you have to push it back. But I mean, we don't know what we're going to be dealing with. I don't know to what extent I'll be involved in that part of this production. I'm just going to be there, and when they call me, I'll come in. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
But we're at.
I can tell you, I'm jealous.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one though. I mean, you'll at least be able to watch it live. But
I'm excited about that part.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end of the show, everyone. I want to thank you all. We made it, extra half hour longer than I thought, but I need to go rest my voice and go, maybe have a little bit something stronger now, maybe an absinthe or a brandy. So I'll see you guys. Well, I won't see you, but you'll see me on Halloween on the Travel Channel. I believe it's 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 Pacific, where they will be 4 hours investigating at the Haunted Museum. And it's hosted by Josh Gates. Should be a fantastic show. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I don't know about Vestiges next week. It's going to depend upon how quickly I get back into town. We got a very late flight on Thursday, so I think we're going to have to take a week off, but I will definitely talk to you all about it on the next episode of Vestiges After Dark. God bless everyone. Take care, and I will see you next time.